Hello and welcome to the 200th episode of Gaming Talk. On this episode I'm going to be discussing and giving my thoughts on F1 2020. Let's get into it. I know I say this every time before I talk about racing games, and that is that I am not an expert on racing games or cars or anything like that. Now before this I never really played much in simulation racing genre. I mostly played Forza Horizon with a small amount of Need for Speed here and there. Though I did play WRC7 before this, which is a sim racer, but it's very different because rally racing versus on-track racing. Formula 1 is something that I now consider myself a very casual enjoyer of, and that's not just because of this game, though it was a big driving factor of that. The My Team aspect of the game is very enjoyable for me. I get to make and customize my drivers, set the color of my car, make team logo, and so on. I really do like that aspect as it makes it feel more special when I get to create my own team and work for them from the bottom of the grid to the top of the grid, though I'd really only say that is depending on what difficulty you're playing on and what difficulty you have the AI set to. Maybe. I don't really know because the game difficulty on casual and the AI on medium is what I have it on, and still managed to qualify first and, win the Grand Prix pretty much every time. So difficulty's kind of all over the place in this game. The game does look great though, which is to be expected with a game from 2020. The racing itself is fun, and I'm so glad there's the racing line because I'd be so bad since I don't know these tracks at all when I first played them. Okay, I still use the racing line because I would never be able to remember when to brake and all that because I had to learn that it's not about braking when it comes to turns. You have to take your foot off the gas, then brake, then off the brake, and finally back on the gas to really do turns right, and it took me a bit to learn that. The races in the racing game are just as important as everything else that goes on in your team's headquarters in between races. You have 4 departments associated mostly with your car, and the morale in the departments goes up and down based on if you shout them out in interviews that take place after practice sessions and after races too. The morale really only affects if new parts do or do not get finished on time when you spend your points on them in the R&D tree. There's a lot of upgrades in the R&D tree as well. Too much for even me to mention a few because Goldfish memory. Point is, I still play the game and I'm in my 4th season I think, and I still have yet to get all the upgrades for my car, but I intend to get them someday. Of course, there's the corporate aspect of an F1 team, like getting sponsors and your teammate, and that's kind of it. As you play the game, complete races, do interviews, and get acclaim, you go from having a single secondary sponsor to 4 of them on top of your main sponsor that you can't change until the season's over. Outside of My Team, there's also the driver career. This is where you can take your created character and drive for an established F1 team like, say, Mercedes or Ferrari or whoever you want. That was on the grid in 2020. You also have less focus on stuff because you're not managing the team anymore. So there's even less in the R&D screen as well. I've done a single season driver career under Mercedes and won pretty much every race except Monaco because that track is made for bicycles and not cars, and I hate that track. So yeah, F1 2020 has a lot to offer, I think. The biggest downside to me here is that if you're on PC, which I am, there's no way to legally buy F1 2020 anymore. You have to resort to pirating it like I did. If you have a PS4 or Xbox One, you can buy disc copies, but it's pretty expensive from what I've seen on a single Google search. I suppose it's not as bad as the fate as F1 2020 on PC, where it doesn't exist on PC anymore, not even a pirate, yet somehow it's much cheaper to buy on PS4 and Xbox One. I've also heard that F1 2019 and 2020 are the highs in the F1 video game franchise, and I can see why, especially when the only other F1 game I attempted was F1 22, and that was not great. So F1 2020 is a good and enjoyable game. That's going to do it. So if you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.